Welcome to the show. It's great to be back. I know I'm tan. Please, no emails about me being tan. I wore sunscreen. I did all of it. We had a lot of major news events during the period that I was gone. Farron and Jesse did a really great job of staying on top of everything for you. And I want to start today with the most requested segment over the last 72 hours, which was people coming to me and saying, David, sir, please tell us what you think about what's going on in Afghanistan. Now, as many of you who have been with the show for a while may remember, you may not, but you may, that we'll find out soon. You might remember that I talked about the Afghanistan withdrawal when Donald Trump planned to do it and announced that he was doing it. And I talked about it again when Joe Biden announced, hey, that pause we put on Trump's Afghanistan withdrawal, we've evaluated it and we are going to do it. And it's going to happen by September 11th. President Joe Biden is now being widely criticized for his actions in Afghanistan, which are carrying out the plan to remove troops that Donald Trump and Republicans bragged about and cheered for months during the end of Donald Trump's presidency. Now, that's not me starting to say, well, I'm going to blame here or there. It's just the reality. What Biden did was to go forward with more or less the plan that Donald Trump announced and that Trump cheered and that Trumpists cheered. Predictably, just like we said a few months ago, whether it was Trump leaving or Biden leaving, it would cause chaos. But at a certain point, our responsibility has to end because our involvement has been a disaster. Staying longer won't solve anything. The Afghanistan intervention failed. And it's really important in these cases when people start saying, oh, we left the wrong way or we did. Oh, we can talk about that. But at a certain point, our involvement had to end, even though Biden is sending 6,000 troops back in now, which we'll get to. And it was going to be a fiasco whenever it ended. Those things were essentially they were certain regardless of which president was in the Oval Office when this happened. So we could stay and keep failing or we could leave. The vacuum when we left, as was worldwide news earlier this week, immediately led to the Taliban taking over and then all sorts of different hot takes. Joe Biden left the wrong way. We do have to ensure the safety of our people and to be empathetic when it comes to refugees. I am on board by saying there should have been better advance action to prevent some of what we saw there. But unfortunately, a lot of it was essentially inevitable, as we said months ago. The same people, pro-Trump Republicans, who now are ignoring that Donald Trump had the same plan, are starting to say this would have been totally different if it had been managed by a different president. Actually, no, it wouldn't have been. And there are some Trumpists as well as people on the left who just don't like Joe Biden, who are now saying, well, the vacuum allowed the Taliban to take over and we didn't do enough to get our people, other people, refugees out in time. If we had done the get people out in time part, you think those people would be satisfied? No, those very same people would just be focusing on the Taliban took over, and we would be seeing the exact same reactions from those people. And sadly, there are tons of bad faith actors on both sides on this issue. Now, I'm not saying the same number of people on both sides. I would be called out for playing the both sides game if I did that. But there are bad faith actors on both sides right now. You have people on the right saying terrible decision by Joe Biden. When Trump was going to do this, it was going to be totally different. No, Trump would have done it in the exact same way. Don't let them lie and say Trump had some master plan for preventing what happened. Trump had no master plan for anything. The idea that he would have had such a plan for Afghanistan is absolutely absurd. Trump would have done the exact same thing. And by the way, all the references to this being Trump's plan all along suddenly removed from the GOP website, Trump's websites, within hours of this going down in Afghanistan. All of those references to Trump's plan to get out of Afghanistan, deal with the Taliban, etc. It's a bold-faced attempt to revise history. Then the left saying this is the typical centrist Democrat foreign policy of Joe Biden. You go in for the wrong reasons and then you cut and run. Well, hold on a second. George W. Bush is responsible for us being there, not Joe Biden, not Donald Trump, and not Barack Obama. There is not nearly enough discussion of George W. Bush here. And I think that, if you go to a bad dentist and the dentist screws up your tooth, and then you go to other dentists and the first dentist that tries to fix it doesn't do a great job, and then you go to a third dentist and that dentist basically gets you out of harm's way, you're not going to have an abscess, but the tooth is going to hurt for several months. We talk about what the third dentist wasn't able to do. We talk about how the second dentist messed up the repair. But what started it was that first dentist who messed up your tooth. And there is not nearly enough discussion, to use a dental analogy, of George W. Bush and the Bush administration's role here. There's a lot of Biden versus Trump stuff. At some point, someone had to say, what George W. Bush started can go no further. No more money into this. No more contractors getting rich. The contractors mostly out of Afghanistan over recent months because the withdrawal was coming. That with the contractors, we've got to stop that as well. And Joe Biden's speech to the nation on Monday, it wasn't satisfying to a lot of people who emailed me, but it was fundamentally an honest speech. And by honest, I mean, it's the type of honesty we don't usually get from politicians. It was one of the most honest political speeches by a president in a long time. And it was completely decisive. We had to do it. We had to do it. As I tweeted earlier this week, quote, so you stay another year to leave correctly, simply delaying what happened by a year, enriching more contractors who would go back in. And so then what? The same thing happens in 2022. At some point, you have to cut your losses. And Joe Biden's speech was decisive, and Joe Biden was the guy to do it. And he takes responsibility for what took place after. Now, if there's anything to really criticize there, it's, well, now 6,000 troops are going back in to help people get out and restabilize, which we could say is going backwards. You pull out the last 1,500, chaos ensues, and you send 6,000 back in. So I'm not saying it's wrong to try to help grease the exit in some way. That's not my criticism. But in a sense, are we really even doing it if 6,000 are going back in? Well, the devil really is in the details with what those 6,000 are going to be doing. And we will get back in. We'll dig into that further, probably later this week. But you know what? It had to be done. You don't tend to see this level of decisive action on foreign policy combined with just telling it like it is. And so I think for that, you have to give Biden credit. And then we figure out which aspects of it could have been better managed. I want to talk to you today about Republican hypocrisy, which has reached heretofore unseen levels. But this isn't about one thing. Like, okay, we've talked about vaccines and hypocrisy before. We had a decade where we talked about gay marriage and hypocrisy from the right. This is a big picture issue that if we can't pierce in some way, we may never make progress on some really important issues that affect the United States and the world. This story was actually inspired by a subreddit user who goes by the name Department Chair, who posted about this a few days ago on the subreddit. Really good post. And I realized this is something we should be talking about right now and really exposing the feckless nature of what is supposedly the right-wing philosophy at this point in time, because Republicans claim to have at the center of their political philosophy the principles of non-intervention by government into people's lives unless completely necessary, of not regulating business unless completely necessary, of a smaller government that does fewer things being a better government, all else being equal. This has been floating around in Republican circles, at least, popularized during the Reagan era, although you could probably find examples of it before then as well. Now, you and I, we've seen this be utter garbage at the micro level. They say small government, but they want the government to ban gay marriage. What? Hold on. What? That doesn't make sense. They say small government, but they want the government policing cannabis at the state and federal level. That doesn't make sense. But the reality is that Republican policy on endless issues is incredibly interventionist, anti-libertarian, collectivist, which they claim to be against. And in some cases, it's even oppressive to the degree that they want to put policy in place. And as our Reddit user, department chair, points out, often this is the case with victimless crimes, flag burning, as an example, same-sex marriage, the Pledge of Allegiance in school. So just step back for a second and think about all of the areas where Republicans, self-professed, so-called small government conservatives, have demanded that government take action over the last many decades. I mean, okay, abortion, decisions that should be made between a patient and a doctor. For 50 years now, ban it federally, they say, ban it at the state level, they say, regulate what procedures do you have to have before an abortion, transvaginal ultrasound, and on and on and on. Regulate family planning. And they claim to be small government conservatives. That's been going on for 50 years. For more than a decade, it was the government should ban same-sex marriage. That was a huge political issue for more than a decade. The battle lines on gay rights have shifted since the 2015 Supreme Court decision, but that was it for a decade. Ban everything, get the government involved. Prevent teachers from deciding what to teach. Ban the teaching of critical race theory. Control what teachers teach as if you know more than they know. The war on drugs. War on drugs. Policing of drugs, prosecution, incarceration, using it to justify surveillance. War on drugs alone is like 10 items that sort of follow from that. Burning flags, something the Supreme Court has decided is constitutionally protected speech. These Republicans, they want to ban it. They want to punish people. A couple months ago, we did a segment where I think it was at a Trump rally. An interviewer was asking people what should happen if somebody burns a flag. Some Republicans called for the death penalty for burning a flag. OK, surveillance, an entire area in and of itself. Now, I will say there are some libertarians, actual libertarians, not just like reactionary right wingers who hide under the name libertarian. There are some actual libertarians who are against much of the surveillance activity that has been put in place by Patriot Act, NSA, et cetera, over the last decade more. But a lot of these right wingers say, no, we need that. We need that in order to find Antifa. We need that in order to monitor Muslims or whatever the case may be. OK, mandating the Pledge of Allegiance in schools. I mean, you've got to be kidding, right? No, many small government involved only when absolutely necessary, wanting to require the Pledge of Allegiance be recited in school. And yet they have the audacity to mention government intrusion and small government and freedom and liberty when they come out against vaccination requirements, even by private businesses, when they come out against mask mandates by municipalities or businesses. And they are even against private businesses simply saying, if you want to work here, you need a vaccine. Or if you want to shop here, you need a vaccine. Think of that. They claim to want businesses to be able to do whatever the hell they want. They say, don't regulate business. Business will decide what's best and the market will punish them if they do the wrong thing. But they say, oh, no. Make it illegal for a business to require an employee be vaccinated. Make it illegal for a business to require masks. Make it illegal for a business to require customers to show proof of vaccination. And why is it? It's all so simple, guys. It's because their principles are BS. They don't really have principles, at least not anymore. They are about whatever talking point sounds good right now, and it gets us what we want right now. That's what we believe in. That's what we stand for until it's no longer convenient, and then they're against that very thing. Their one principle is somehow figure out a way to own the libs. It's truly one of the most bad faith political movements I can think of. And, you go back and you look at the racist origins of the war on drugs in reaction to the civil rights movement of the late 50s, early 60s. You look at the anti-welfare movement of the Reagan era and how racially tinged that was and all these different. There was a lot of bad faith going on. But at this point, they're barely even pretending to have principles. Even their principles, like you hear them and it's like, come on, dude, that's BS. You don't even believe that because look at example 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, where you abandon those principles because the outcome of applying that principle would no longer be the one you want. So why do we care about this? We care about it because since it has become the orthodoxy of the Republican Party. I mean, you want to see hypocrisy? Mitch McConnell on Supreme Court picks, right? Just look. It's the perfect example of how this unbridled and unpunished hypocrisy gets them political wins. And so if we don't find a way to pierce this, I worry seriously that the left will struggle to really make progress on some major important issues. Let me know what you think. OK, you can find me and follow me on Twitter at dpacman. It's great to be back. We have a really big show for you today. I'll talk about my vacation on the bonus show. Let me just preview one aspect of the bonus show today. Positive COVID test. That's all I'm going to say on today's bonus show. All right, let's get back into it. It's great to be back in the studio today. I do want to remind you, not only is this program mostly funded by memberships who sign up at joinpacman.com, members who get memberships at joinpacman.com. We did do our 16th anniversary special on Monday. If you missed it and you want the discount code, just email info@davidpacman.com. Today is a great day to sign up. Why? I have a story from my vacation, which I will tell on today's bonus show, which I will summarize only as positive COVID test. This is an incredible story, okay, on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com. Speaking of COVID, persistent COVID mismanager, Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott has tested positive for the coronavirus. He's reportedly isolating, and he is receiving a monoclonal antibody treatment, according to his office. Now, remember that this is the same Greg Abbott who wanted to block local officials from mandating masks, who wanted to open everything, who was part of the administration whose Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said, "Grandma will sacrifice herself for the economy." That was early in the pandemic back in 2020. Now, you might be asking, why was Abbott even tested, given that he is asymptomatic? Because he's reportedly been tested daily, and he finally turned up positive for the first time this week. They've also announced that everybody Abbott has been in contact with has been notified. Now, I really wonder whether that's true, because that is a ton of people. Look at these videos. In the video I'm playing for you now, this is from the last couple of days. You see Greg Abbott indoors. He's the one in the wheelchair in the middle of the frame as the camera pans to the right, without a mask, in a room with maybe 100 people without masks, hugging, taking pictures, shaking hands. That was Monday night when he was presumably already positive for the virus. His positive test was yesterday. Here's another video of Abbott on yesterday, on stage at a big Republican event, singing maskless. We know that singing is a major spread activity. This is in a big crowd. The entire crowd is actually singing. Check this out. Along the track, deep in the heart of Texas, the rapids rush around the rush. Deep in the heart of Texas, the cowboys ride into the heart. Deep in the heart. Okay, so that's probably enough. Sorry for subjecting you to that there. So there is Greg Abbott, presumably COVID positive, singing. And then here is Abbott in a very cozy close-up meeting with a supporter of some kind, a fan of his, we might say, maskless indoor greeting at one of these events. So how many people did the Republican governor give the virus to before he tested positive himself? Now, he will probably be fine. He has the best medical care money can buy. Your money, by the way, I mean tax money. He's getting the antibody treatment. He's reportedly asymptomatic. And think about that for a second. Vaccinated and no symptoms. And he still gets the expensive antibody treatment. These guys are truly horrible. Zoom out and it's this dystopian big picture. They go around advocating for not taking precautions. They say, don't close anything. Grandparents willing to die, sacrifice themselves for the economy. So they take no precautions. Tons of people in their state get sick and die. Then they get an asymptomatic case and immediately get the best treatment available, even one that would never go to an asymptomatic vaccinated person. and they, at least what's thought to be a good treatment. And then they pretend that that's proof that we don't really need to worry about it. Look, listen, I got the vaccine. I didn't wear a mask. I did my thing. I got the expensive monoclonal antibodies and I came out fine. So we really don't need to worry about it, even though that's a treatment almost none of us would get if we were to become sick. And he gets it all paid for by our taxes, some federal, state, etc. Understand that this is not a minor point. He's fully vaccinated. He's asymptomatic. He feels fine, but he gets the monoclonal antibody treatment anyway. Now, the other possibility, and a few people wrote to me saying, you know, David, maybe it's not that he's asymptomatic and getting the antibody treatment. Maybe it's that they're lying that he's asymptomatic. He's actually really sick, but they're going to give him that treatment anyway. I just don't think so. I mean, the video of him around a ton of people is from yesterday. So unless he got like really sick late yesterday and they already are putting him on the antibody, I just don't think so. I think that he's just getting the treatment because he's the governor of Texas. And by the way, you know, just as a little, because you hear from all these anti-vaxxers, the vaccine's not yet fully approved by the FDA, sir. Neither is the monoclonal antibody treatment. It's approved under this very same type of emergency use authorization that the vaccines are. So tons of anti-vaxxers, it's funny because they say that vaccine, no. That's not fully approved by the FDA. Plus, we have a great treatment. If I did get it and I did get really sick, we've got the monoclonal antibodies. That's the same type of emergency use authorization. Neither is fully approved by the FDA. So absurd at the macro level, ridiculous at the micro level, feeds misinformation. And some of these governors seem determined to just keep going until such time that everybody in their state has COVID. And the first guy that comes to mind when I think of that is Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Let's talk about him a little bit next. What is going on in Florida right now with coronavirus is so hellacious. It's so dreadful. It's so vicious that if we're not careful, Republicans might make Ron DeSantis their 2024 Republican presidential nominee. Republicans seemingly obsessed with choosing the worst people to be their nominees. And DeSantis is really messing things up in Florida. Let's take a look at what's happening. Florida started the pandemic not well. Ron DeSantis very early saying closures now, open everything. WWE needs a place for wrestling matches. Come to Florida. UFC wants to do fights. Come to Florida. Bring the cruise ships. Ban masks in school. On and on and on. Okay. First of all, the case graph in Florida almost looks like a cartoon. Since the end of July, Florida, which is just one of 50 states, it represents just 6% of the country's population. Florida regularly hitting 20,000 cases a day, 25,000 cases a day, day after day after day. Even these numbers may be low because of lack of testing. I got a report yesterday from a viewer in Florida who said at doctor's offices, there can be a 5-hour wait to get a COVID test. And then the only other types of testing you can get are the ones that you have to book days in advance. And then you often don't get the results for days either. So it appears as though, at least anecdotally, the testing availability in Florida is so dire that the case counts are probably being undercounted. OK, it's so terrible in Florida to get a test that many people who should be getting tested just aren't. And we are getting an undercount by every sense of the data on the ground. Now, you might come in and you might say, well, hold on, but if the vaccine makes COVID not serious, then cases don't really matter since people who are vaccinated and get COVID don't really get sick, right? Well, this is a Florida explosion, mostly of the unvaccinated, as we're seeing in many states. Florida's COVID hospitalizations have hit another record high. Now, you might say, David, right before you went on break, didn't you tell us Florida's hospitalizations hit a record high? And I did, but it's a new record. We've surpassed that number. COVID hospitalizations hit new high in Florida. A new report from the Florida Hospital Association showed 16,521 people hospitalized with the coronavirus, up 773 from the day before and 162% higher than this time last year. Now, then you might say, okay, hospitalizations, but we're better at treating it now. What about deaths? Florida has done something, I guess we can call it slick. It's really completely dishonest about death reporting. As you can see here, as all of this ramped up in Florida, deaths started to skyrocket. But when you look at the death count, if you look at the chart we have on screen, a few days ago, all of a sudden the deaths dropped to almost zero. How did they do it? Oh my God, Ron DeSantis fixed COVID. There's almost no deaths in Florida anymore. How do they do it? Record cases, record hospitalizations, and the deaths dropped to almost zero. Well, they are lying. And what I mean by that is they are being very deceptive in how they report deaths. They are reporting deaths in bulk, infrequently, and on a delay. So when you look, the latest days always seem low. It looks like there's been this big decline. If you look at our chart, after a bunch of days with 100 deaths a day, 110 deaths a day, 120 deaths a day, suddenly Florida had 11 deaths on Monday, only seven deaths yesterday. How could this be? The answer is these are not real numbers. In another week, they will come out and report the death numbers for this week. They will be high. The chart will be readjusted. But then again, there will be blanks. It'll be almost zero for the dates next week that are recent. And it always looks like it's a huge decline. It's incredibly deceptive because at any point, a denier, someone who doesn't understand what Florida's doing with the death numbers, they can just pull up the data and say, look, massive decline in deaths in Florida. It's completely deceptive. Florida is on COVID fire. More than 5,000 students are now quarantined or isolated in just one school district. We're seeing pediatric ICU cases in Florida like we haven't seen anywhere the entire pandemic. And this is after a very short period of time of schools reopening. Many of the pediatric ICU cases may not even have been from in-school contagion yet. So it could get even worse in Florida, if you can imagine. And we're going to have more coverage of the Florida situation on the David Pakman Show Instagram. Make sure you're following us at David Pakman Show. If you want to know what I was up to for the last 10 days, follow my Instagram at david.pakman. And we have a very, if you want a vegetable break, I had a crazy backyard garden harvest waiting for me when I got back from my trip yesterday. I posted a picture to my Instagram at david.pakman. Find it, follow me, and we'll be back right after this. All right, so I want to go over a couple of these stories, which have now become all too common, where some anti-vax person, some COVID denier, some anti-Faucist, whatever, ends up getting sick and dying of coronavirus. And one of these stories I know Farron did while I was gone, but I want to give my take on it, and I think there's quite a bit to say. These are not like fun, happy stories. They're not funny stories. For me, it's not. I mean, listen, you guys know I don't take pleasure in the death of folks who just fell for bad information. But we can't ignore the fact that especially when they change their mind on the vaccine, once they get sick and people hear that, it can be a cautionary tale, and it may actually have some impact in getting more people to go ahead and get vaccinated. So let's start with the first one. This is a story of H. Scott Appley, a Texas Republican official who mocked the COVID pandemic 5 days before dying of the virus. Okay? H. Scott Appley. The Daily Beast writes, a Republican official from Texas who regularly espoused anti-vaccine, anti-mask views online has died from COVID-19 5 days after posting a meme on Facebook questioning the wisdom of getting inoculated against COVID. Dickinson City Council member and state Republican Executive Committee member H. Scott Appley, 45 years old, not 65 plus, not 75, 85, the way many Republicans like to say, 45-year-old H. Scott Appley died in a local hospital around 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. according to a GoFundMe page set up to help his family with expenses. Now, I'm going to get to that in a moment as well. He was admitted to the facility in Galveston on Sunday with pneumonia-like symptoms, hooked up to a ventilator as his condition worsened. His wife was also infected. Texas Republican Party Chairman Matt Rinaldi said, please join me in lifting the Apley family up in prayer. See, instead of praying now, what about vaccinating before? Is that crazy? Is that a crazy reaction to have? Now the prayer. Going on to say, we will miss Scott deeply, but find comfort in knowing he's at peace in the arms of our Savior. You find comfort in that? What about the fact that he could have been vaccinated and would have been very unlikely to see this happen? What about that part? The opposite of comfort is what that should be. The announcement did not mention that Apley's death was COVID related. Apley is a staunch conservative and devout Christian, but based on his social media activity, Apley didn't believe COVID was going to affect him or his family. In May, Apley posted an invitation for a mask burning being held at a bar in Cincinnati, commenting, I wish I lived in the area. A couple weeks earlier, he posted a news article about giveaways and incentives meant to encourage people to get vaccinated, writing, disgusting. Apley also railed against so-called vaccine passports, which restrict high-risk activities such as indoor dining to the fully vaccinated. Recently, he suggested mask mandates in Germany were akin to Nazism. And when former Baltimore Health Commissioner Leanna Wen celebrated good news about the Pfizer vaccine efficacy, a seemingly outraged Apley called her an absolute enemy of a free people. You can go on. It's all the same stuff. In Facebook posts, Apley wrote, if businesses start allowing customers and employees go mask-free only with voluntarily providing their vaccination record, presumably not a HIPAA misspelled violation, wouldn't that basically we can't even understand a word this guy was writing. What a mess. So listen, what are the takeaways here? I'm not happy this guy died, but if his death serves to get some anti-vaxxers vaccinated, it will not be totally in vain, although it is a senseless death, which almost certainly, not 100%, but almost certainly could have been prevented with a vaccine. So takeaway number one, we have something, the vaccine, which makes you really unlikely to get super sick and die of COVID. Now, there's data coming out about breakthrough deaths, right? We're learning that we're probably all heading towards third doses. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Big announcement expected probably today. We're learning that efficacy wanes over time, but it's still a very powerful tool for making you unlikely to be hospitalized and die. That's takeaway number one. Now, some people still will die, right? Like with flu, with colds, sometimes in a planet of 7 billion people, things that don't normally cause a problem, statistically very small number, but still a percentage, will cause a problem and people will die. But most won't when they are vaccinated. It's the best tool we have, and choosing not to take advantage of it is absurd. Now, the GoFundMe page, I mentioned that they have a GoFundMe. They talk about personal responsibility. They choose not to get vaccinated. They still expect to be taken care of at the hospital. And then they or their families beg for money for health care, which almost certainly is not money they would need because they didn't get vaccinated. Had they gotten vaccinated, they probably wouldn't need that money. That is not personal responsibility. That is not personal responsibility. And that's another aspect. Earlier in the show, I talked about, the stated principles for lots of these people. They're not deeply held beliefs. They're just what they think they can say now to get what they want out of society or out of a government or out of people in their lives. And the principles are abandoned as soon as it's no longer convenient for them. Let's now talk about another one of these stories, sadly. Farron Cousins, during my break, talked about this, and I want to talk a little bit more about it because this is now an actual broadcaster. Vocal anti-vaccine broadcaster Dick Farrell has died from COVID-19 complications. Okay, this was about a week ago. I was away when it took place. Friends say Dick Farrell encouraged them to get the vaccine after he was infected. So this is out of Florida. Former South Florida talk show host Dick Farrell, known and beloved by fans for his over-the-top right-wing opinions, has died from complications from COVID-19. On Facebook, Farrell advocated against getting the coronavirus vaccine and was skeptical of Dr. Anthony Fauci, chief of the U.S. NIH, and his recommendations concerning the coronavirus. Friends say after contracting the virus, he changed his point of view. COVID took one of my best friends. Rest in peace, Dick Farrell. He is the reason I took the shot. He texted me and told me, get it. He told me this virus is no joke, and he said, I wish I had gotten it. That's Farrell's close friend, Amy Lee Hare. On her Facebook page, she said to WPTV, I was one of the people like him who just didn't trust the vaccine. I trusted my immune system. I just became more afraid of getting COVID-19 than I was of any possible side effects of the vaccine. I'm glad I got vaccinated. That's a good thing. And, when we talk about senseless death, there's a lot of different things that we could mean. We could mean that it was avoidable. That's one thing. When we say senseless death, this was easily avoidable. It made no sense. Sometimes by senseless death, we mean it was a death that accomplished nothing. So if the military is waging some battle that is a pointless battle, that win, lose, it's irrelevant, it doesn't do it, it helps no one, and then someone dies, we would say it was a senseless death because the death didn't even contribute anything to a worthwhile cause. So senseless death can mean a number of different things. If we are going to have these anti-vax people, and some of them are going to die, are we better off if they are prominent and have a platform? And then it gets out that, hey, this person that you might have heard of, this person you listen to, they now are saying get the vaccine. Does it reduce the senselessness of the death? I think to some degree it does. Former market general manager for CBS Radio West Palm Beach, Lee Strasser, remembers Farrell. He was flamboyant, outrageous, willing to take on any and all comers, loved to engage with local politicians, pulled no punches. Was he right all the time? No. But he was right all the time, meaning right wing, especially if you asked him. Did he stay out of trouble? Not always. Was he great with clients? Yes. Was he a pleasure in the building? Absolutely. Was he loyal? Unquestionably. Was he skilled? Yes, sir. His passing is a big loss. He was a kind-hearted person, etc., etc. So a straight-up anti-vaxxer now saying, go and get yourself the vaccine. This is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. And particularly, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but particularly as it looks like at the 8-month mark of your vaccination, it will be recommended to get a third dose. What the J&J vaccine recipients will be instructed to do, we don't yet know. But for those who got the 2-dose vaccines, Pfizer or Moderna, with a third dose likely coming, this is going to be another opportunity to have significantly more protection. And it's going to be another opportunity for these people to go, they just want to keep vaxing in order to control us or microchip or whatever the case may be. So as bad as it's been, unfortunately, when the third dose recommendations go sort of widespread, and that could be anywhere in the next 24 to 48 hours, there will unfortunately be even more of this that we're going to have to contend with. All right, so as most of you probably noticed, while I was gone, Donald Trump wasn't reinstated. Joe Biden is still the president. Mike Lindell was wrong. Q, whatever, Z, Y, they were all wrong. X, okay. Oh, you guys get it. Trump is not going to be reinstated. The Department of Homeland Security is now actually increasingly worried about the demands for violence they're starting to see from Trumpist circles if Donald Trump is not reinstated. Now, of course, you and I know Trump is not going to be reinstated. And so that's very, very concerning. There's a good Rolling Stone article, which we're going to look at, by Peter Wade, called "Diehard Trump Supporters Increasingly Demand Violence If He Isn't Reinstated. Homeland Security Warns." The Department of Homeland Security issued a warning. Believers in the false conspiracy theory that Trump will be reinstated have increased their calls for violence if the former president isn't back in the White House soon. Some conspiracy theories associated with reinstating former President Trump have included calls for violence if desired outcomes are not realized, the DHS bulletin obtained by ABC News said. The bulletin went on to say that the recent increase in public visibility of liars like the My Pillow guy Mike Lindell, by the way, check out his interview with me from a couple weeks ago, is the reason for the uptick in violent online chatter. Lindell continues to relentlessly push the big lie that the election was stolen, going so far as to say that he expects the Supreme Court to unanimously rule in favor of reinstating Trump as president in August. That's a delusional belief. Over the last few days, what has occurred is there's been much more public visibility, meaning the discussions and these theories have migrated away from being contained within the conspiracy extremist online communities to where they're being the topic of discussion on web forums or more public web forums, even within the sort of media ecosystem. That's according to a senior DHS official. The drunk on Trump crowd has been triggered so much that Homeland Security says they're concerned about the calls for violence increasing further. We have been concerned about the exact same thing. Going on to say, does this bulletin, as public visibility of the narratives increases, we're concerned about more calls to violence. Past circumstances have illustrated that calls for violence could expand rapidly in the public domain and may be occurring outside of publicly available channels. As such, lone offenders and small groups of individuals could mobilize to violence with little to no warning. The DHS added, although they do not have specifics of an imminent threat, their reporting indicates the timing for these activities may occur during August, although we lack information on specific plots or planned actions. So there's a few different things here. Number one, Donald Trump is going back to the rallies this Saturday. In fact, I'm debating. I'll tell you, it's like this stuff is so base, but I'll tell you. So Trump's doing a rally in Alabama this Saturday, 8 p.m. East, 7 p.m. Central. I'll be streaming it. There are some who believe that at this rally, Donald Trump is going to call for another insurrection and that all hell is going to break loose. That's one hypothesis. The other idea that's been floated is that at the rally Saturday, Trump will be reinstated. That's it'll be in Alabama because it's a good southern state, I guess. Who the hell knows? And Trump will be reinstated on Saturday. And there are fears that when he is obviously not reinstated Saturday, that some of the followers will take to violence immediately. I don't know what the hell is going on. So that's one piece of it. And that's part of the relevance of this particular week. Secondly, how lowbrow is it to have Trump as a hero? Like what, this is very coarse, right? This is not deep politics, but the bizarre hair and the strange tan and the idiocy. He doesn't know anything about history or economics or politics, hasn't read a book in his adult life. He's a billionaire, but he can't even get suits that look even reasonably okay. Like he's just an embarrassing mess of a person. And you really have to understand cults to understand what's going on. It's the Jim Jones stuff. I go back to the People's Temple, Road to Jonestown. Check out Jeff Gwynn's book. It's a fantastic, it's instructive history, really, about how these cult leader types end up with the followers that they have. So DHS is worried. We've been worried. And let's hope that nothing like this happens this weekend. Here's a really interesting question. If I ask you as a probable, who's the typical David Pakman Show viewer? Just on average, the David Pakman Show viewer is a college educated, often making more than $75,000 a year, mostly male, as many of these shows are, vaccinated individual. Okay. The average David Pakman Show viewer, and of course, there's people of all kinds in the audience. I'm just giving you the demographic data we have about how our audience skews. The average David Pakman Show viewer, if I ask them, I'll ask you right now, who is to blame for the accelerated rise in COVID that we are seeing right now? What individuals? Most of you would say the people who have chosen not to get vaccinated. Now, of course, the Delta variant is more contagious. We're still understanding seasonality, decreased waning efficacy of the vaccine after the 8-month period, all these different things. But obviously, if everybody was vaccinated by now, we wouldn't be seeing what we are seeing right now, in particular, hospitalizations and deaths. Now, let me ask you a different question. If I asked you, What or who would the average unvaccinated person blame for the spike in COVID? What would you say? Well, there is a new Axios Ipsos poll, and it is absolutely insane. Look at this. So I'm putting the graph up on the screen. I'm going to explain it to everybody, okay? The answers in green are the answers of vaccinated people, whereas the answers in red are the answers of unvaccinated people. So case in point, you go to the vaccinated and you say, what's to blame for the rise of COVID and the new variants? 79% of the vaccinated say the unvaccinated are to blame. Okay, that's backed up by science. The vaccinated also blame, in descending order, Donald Trump, conservative media. Now, they're not saying Trump is infecting people, but it's the vaccine hesitant and COVID isn't serious rhetoric of Trump. Conservative media doing the same thing. Foreign travelers in the U.S., Americans traveling internationally, etc. Okay. The unvaccinated, they immediately gravitate to foreign travelers in the U.S. are the ones that are to blame. And then they go to mainstream media is to blame. And in fourth place, they have Joe Biden is to blame. And then they have the CDC is to blame. And then they have national public health officials are to blame. This is a completely backwards view. And by the way, only 9.8% of the unvaccinated blame themselves for what is going on right now. This is a view which is based on why do we blame the CDC and the national public health officials? Well, because they can't be trusted. And Fauci was wrong about masks in March of 2020. And they're spreading lies and gain of function research and all of this different stuff. Joe Biden is to blame. Joe Biden has been trying to get people vaccinated. Biden's to blame. What? What are you talking about? And then foreign travelers in the United States seems to be the point of agreement. Right around, 29%. I'll put the numbers back up on the board. 29% of the vaccinated and 37% of the unvaccinated say foreign travelers in the U.S. are to blame. That's the one where these numbers are relatively close. This is just a worldview that is totally disconnected from what the science tells us. So how do we deal with this? These are not folks. Listen, if you think mainstream media is behind the explosion of Delta case infections and hospitalizations and deaths, how are we going to be able to have an even remotely substantive conversation with you? We're not going to be able to. So then what do we have to do? We probably have to do what some cities and states, or mostly cities, are starting to do. You want to go to the movies? You got to be vaccinated. You want to go to a restaurant and sit indoors? You got to be vaccinated. I'll talk on the bonus show today about my trip. When I was in Germany, I went to a place that had it was like a beer garden, German beer garden, had a big outdoor area and an indoor area. I went to the door. The waitress comes up and says, if you want to go inside, I need to see vaccination or a negative test from today. And it makes sense that that's what you would start doing. You've got to start making it more annoying not to be vaccinated, because if you think mainstream media is behind the rise in cases and not the fact that we've only fully vaccinated roughly half the country, then it's going to be very hard to convince you otherwise. Really, really difficult stuff. And by the way, speaking of, can't you just fake a vaccine card? Yeah, you can. And that's actually the topic of today's voicemail. We have a voicemail number, and that number is 2192-DAVID-P. You can call anytime. I am slowly going through the 600 voicemails I have from when I was away. Here is one that came in about a guy whose friends are going to fake vaccine cards. Take a listen.
Hi, David. Big fan of your show. I just found out, very heartbreaking, that two of my friends that I was close with, they both plan on getting fake COVID vaccine cards.
Yep.
And I tried to report them to the local Department of Health. I'm not sure if I'm doing enough, though. So if I could get any insight on this, I'm kind of shaking because I was so upset when I found out this morning.
It's a disgusting thing to be doing. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, is requiring vaccination a waste of time if you can fake a vaccine card? No. No system is foolproof. No system is foolproof. But it's so easy to get vaccinated. I know you'll say a lot of people don't want to get vaccinated for political reasons, and I get that. But it's so easy to get vaccinated. It's really easy for most people. It's easier to get vaccinated than to figure out how to put together a vaccine card that you feel really would pass muster. That the whole point is, let's just use that to convince more people to go and get vaccinated. No system is foolproof. I mean, I'll be honest. To get back to the United States from Europe, I needed a negative test within 72 hours of coming back. And I did one. I got one. I brought a test with me that I connect with someone. It's called a telehealth observation. They watch me do the test. I put the drops in the thing. They verify that I did it correctly. It comes back negative. They send me a PDF. I could have faked the PDF. I mean, at Frankfurt Airport, it was 5 seconds that they looked at it. And really all they looked at was, does it say negative? Does it say my name? And is the date within 3 days? I could have been showing anything at all. Are some people probably faking the negative test? Yes. But for enough people, it's difficult enough to know, how do I make a real, a good looking PDF, this, that. I'll just go and get myself the test. Any system is going to have some people that get around it. No system is foolproof. I don't think that's a reason not to do it. Now, what essentially is being done when you fake a CDC vaccination record is you are using an official government agency's seal without authorization. And that's a crime. Okay. So when people do that, there may be law written to specifically go for faking vaccination, but faking a CDC certificate is a crime. It can be punishable under Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 1017, and other laws. So it is a crime. So you should report it. If you know of people that are doing this, this is really, it's an attack on humanity, really, because what you're doing is you're endangering people. And the recommendation is you call 1-800-HHS-TIPS, or you can go to ic3.gov. That's for internet crime. I don't know if it's exactly an internet crime, but that's another recommendation. So 1-800-HHS-TIPS or ic3.gov. You can also contact local law enforcement. You can contact your local district attorney general. Almost anyone should be able to direct you as to what to do. So not only should we make it easier to just get vaccinated than to fake a certificate, we should really be making examples out of people that are caught faking the certificates. I've already read, in fact, that because the card can be faked, that there's going to be a different method and electronic record maybe, or whatever the case may be. We're going to have to wait and see. All right. It's so great to be back. We have a fantastic bonus show. Producer Pat will defiantly and heroically rejoin me on the award-winning, world-famous bonus show. I am going to talk to you about my trip. I'm going to talk to you about positive COVID test. I have a story from my trip that I am calling positive COVID test. And we will talk about so many other things that are taking place and things we missed during my break and so on and so forth. So get instant access. You go to joinpacman.com. You sign up. We did do a 16th anniversary special. If you missed the email and you want the code, send an email to info@davidpacman.com. You are not going to want to miss. Listen, I'll give you, I don't have COVID. Okay. I don't have COVID, but I'm going to give you a story that is crazy involving a positive COVID test over my trip. So sign up at joinpacman.com. We'll speak to you then. We're here tomorrow. I look forward to taking some of your calls on the Friday show. It's really great to be back.